How's it going, everybody? We've got some pretty good news today for Bitcoin, and likely the reason that we're getting a nice pop from it. Vanguard now finally caves on the spot Bitcoin ETFs, crypto ETFs in general, actually, and they opened their $9.3 trillion platform to the crypto ETFs. If you didn't know, Vanguard is one of the legacy brokerages that said no to the spot ETFs. Back in January of 2024, when they went live, Vanguard was saying, I'm going to stay out of it. I don't want to be involved. And on December 2, they'll open their massive brokerage platform to allow Bitcoin, ETH, XRP, Solana, ETFs. And I think this next statement here is kind of BS. For years, Vanguard stood as the most prominent holdout of the crypto space, driven by a philosophy that viewed the high volatility of digital assets as fundamentally incompatible with the principles of long-term diversified portfolio construction. Vanguard is the first brokerage that I bought CleanSpark from. CleanSpark, the Bitcoin miners, are a lot more volatile than Bitcoin. So I think that statement is just completely false. Now, they aren't going to deviate from their core manufacturing philosophy. They're not launching their own proprietary crypto funds, but they are going to allow clients to trade. It'll be a gateway for clients to access iBit or Fidelity's and Bitwise's funds. Now, the CEO of Bitwise noticed that we had a muted reaction, although it does seem like Bitcoin's reacting very positively to it now. But this is the second largest brokerage in America. They're flipping their policy, allowing these crypto ETF purchases finally, and yet no one's fired up. Whether people are stoked right now or not, crypto is rapidly entering the mainstream. And we knew this was a matter of time until Vanguard would finally cave, finally go with the rest of the group, and finally allow these assets to be traded on their platform. And this is a great statement that kind of opens your eyes. Furthermore, this move is an acknowledgement of irrefutable market realities. A recent study found that 35% of younger, wealthy Americans have left their financial advisors because they don't allow access to crypto. The younger generations are embracing crypto, and this will only continue to accelerate. And the proof is in the pudding. BlackRock's iBit has become one of the fastest growing ETFs in US history. Now, I will leave that down below for you if you want to read it yourself, but let's take a look at Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is seeing a nice bounce, so roughly 6% move up. We need to hold these lows, One thing that's very positive, I'll go to the weekly here, is we did see this level hold up. We did see it wick down, but we held up so far on the weekly candles. I think if we get a break of this, we're, for one, definitely going to test 80,000 if we do break this green line. Flipped as a resistance, and then on the next breakout, a massive rally. So far, it's acting as a support. Hopefully, it continues on acting as a support, but if it doesn't, if we break this green line, we're likely to test this 80,005 roughly. If we break that, we're likely to test 75, which was a previous resistance point as well, became a support. One thing that's also very interesting, these pullbacks we've had throughout this bull market have been anywhere from 30 to 36% or so. This pullback being roughly 36%. Our last one, about 32%. And the one before, about 30%. These roughly 30% pullbacks are normal in this bull market. We've seen it before. One thing we've also seen that I have said a million times and got sick of telling everyone, seemed to fall on deaf ears, is this death cross. Every death cross we have had this bull market ended up marking a bottom, and this may be the case here, as long as we don't revisit our lows. This death cross, you can barely see because I got too much crap in the way, flashed just a few days ago, late November, and we did get a low right around that point, funny enough. Another death cross that you could hardly see. Right there is the death cross where the red crosses the green. That did mark a bottom. Again, the red crosses the green. That marked a bottom. Again, the red crossed the green. That marked a bottom. Now, this is a pattern we've seen throughout the bull market. One thing we want to see that would be very encouraging and could be kind of the fuel that breaks us out to that next level and gets us to test our moving averages is a break of this descending trend. You have this clear resistance. If we can break out of this, we're very close. If we can break out, I think we're going to come and test our 50 MA right at $100,000 or so. Last time Bitcoin was this oversold, we didn't have a little pop and then continue selling off. No, we had a continued run all the way to overbought. This might be the case again. This was the last time we were this oversold. This was the last time we had this fear level on the fear and greed index. Right here in February, we were talking about that yesterday with the fear and greed index. This marked a bottom. This may be, in fact, the bottom. Everyone is extremely bearish right now. Everyone has a horrible sentiment. People are also considering the cycle, Typically, things come to an end at the end of this year, and 2026 would be the bear market, the bear year, essentially, where you get a full year of mostly downtrends with some slight dead cat bounces, slight recoveries along the way, but continuing to mostly create new lows throughout the year. The fact that we had this massive pullback towards the end of the year here has me thinking that things may of course play out slightly differently. You definitely want to tread carefully with Bitcoin this late in this cycle. Basically, you don't want to be buying everything heavily. I think Bitcoin's always a great DCA, especially here in my opinion. But right now we're essentially in limbo. We're unsure of if we're going to fill out the traditional cycle, see a bear market in 2026, or do we start our recovery here and go on a multi-month run. We do have QE coming. We do have a very likely rate cut coming. We have this great news with Vanguard, one of the largest brokerages in the game, and we have this retail sentiment that hasn't been worse in quite a while. Now, glancing at the Bitcoin miners, we're a bit mixed, mostly green, which you'd expect for a pretty nice day from Bitcoin, but we do have Iren in the red, 6.5% down almost, a couple others in the red. Most others are anywhere from 0.5% up to about 5% up or so, Bitcoin outperforming the group. One thing to consider is this news is more Bitcoin based. Essentially, if you think about it, Vanguard already allows all these Bitcoin miners. Vanguard was actually the first brokerage I bought CleanSpark on. I don't know why it just did that. But you know, the thing with Vanguard is you could buy these Bitcoin miners on there. The Bitcoin ETF news is definitely bigger news for Bitcoin. Obviously, the Bitcoin miners are going to track Bitcoin here and there, but it kind of makes sense to see an outsized move from Bitcoin. When typically when you get a big move from Bitcoin, the Bitcoin miners move more so. This news is definitely centered around Bitcoin. Like I said, Vanguard is now going to allow Bitcoin ETFs, crypto ETFs in general. They already allowed all these Bitcoin miners, but this is a net positive for the proxies, for everybody, for Bitcoin. This is more money that can flow into Bitcoin. I did want to talk about Iren, look at their chart, and talk about this recent news. Iren plans to sell up to $2.3 billion of convertible notes and selling shares to repurchase existing debt. Bitcoin miner Iren plans to issue as much as $2.3 billion of new convertible notes, and they're selling shares to fund buybacks of their 2029 and 2030 notes that were announced back in October, I believe. When you get this offering news, typically you see a little sell-off. They're basically issuing shares into the market, diluting existing shareholders. One thing Iren seems to be trying to do is hold this previous resistance that we've had throughout this cycle. You'll see that this was a cycle. We had our dollar price back in 2022. We ran to this resistance at $5. Ran to it again as a resistance, and it just basically continued to be a resistance, continued to be a great point to trim, a point to sell. You get these bearish divergences at the top, very clear, concise, easy to follow pattern until things kind of changed. Now it seems like it's reacting to this area. You get a lot of chop here at least, which makes me think that the market is somewhat reacting to this trend. It would be nice to see Iren recover over it, kind of treat it as a support. One thing that it's also doing is it got rejected off the 50 MA. We broke under it. We found it as resistance. Maybe I'll move this out of the way for you guys so you can actually see. Found it as resistance, and we're kind of chopping around. If Iren breaks this $40 area, we're likely to come down possibly to the 200 MA if it doesn't find another area of support, because it really doesn't have any. Believe it or not, Iren is just finally now breaking under overbought on the monthly. It's very, very heavily overbought. If you're considering getting in here, you might want to be patient, see how things kind of level out at this area. You know, we did just break this trend. You see the bounce here, a reaction on the break. Iren is now down about 42% from its recent highs. Going back to when this run started back in April, when basically the Bitcoin started its run, its last run it had, Iren is still up 700, 800%. It can definitely fall more. It can definitely revert more to its mean. Like I said, you know, get this monthly RSI kind of back to a neutral area. It is still right near overbought. Preferably, you'd see things reset nicely to give us a lot of room for another leg up before things become vastly overbought again. Iren is now anticipating a loss in their upcoming earnings. The positive here with Iren versus the other Bitcoin miners is they don't hold Bitcoin. Bitcoin this quarter is very likely to give them an unrealized loss because it started the quarter a lot higher than it's likely to end this quarter here in the end of December. So for that reason, Iren might have a better earnings than most of the others that hold massive amounts of Bitcoin that are, like I said, going to be hit with an unrealized loss on their Bitcoin because their Bitcoin holdings lost value from the beginning of the quarter to the end of the quarter. But let me know what you guys think about this Bitcoin and Vanguard news. I think this is a pretty big deal. The market seems to agree. Is this going to be what helps with our recovery along with that death cross that has always marked a bottom for Bitcoin throughout this bull market? Do you think we're going to see a Santa rally, an end of year run? We do have a very likely rate cut coming from the Fed in a couple days. People are counting out a run for Bitcoin. People are all anticipating that the bear market's starting. We're heading a lot lower. It seems very, very similar to those Mt. Gox days when we dropped under 70,000, went all the way to the 40s. People thought the cycle was done. The manipulation is just too severe from Wall Street. Bitcoin's never going to recover. And just like that, it went to new all-time highs, fooled everybody out. It's very possible that this is what we see here, a violent recovery, a run to new all-time highs. I'm not counting it out, but I would be very careful buying at this level, at these points in the cycle. I think it's still a very important thing to try to keep cash on the side. If things do pump, make sure you're taking some profits, trimming if you didn't trim back in October, early November when we were getting that last run. But thanks as always for watching, guys. I appreciate you, and I'll see you tomorrow.